A super quick reminder, let me remind you, we are focusing on paper 1, which is 30%, obviously of 100, of the overall AQA GCSE PE. And just to remind you again, that when we talk about our paper 1, the assessment objectives that we are talking about are these objectives here. We are interested in AO1 to AO3. That is what is going to be featured on our actual paper 1. Those things being knowledge and understanding, those things being application, those things being analysing and evaluating. AO4 is reserved for the non-examination assessment. Now, with that in mind, folks, I want to sort of show you a bit of a front cover of a paper and remind yourselves, we know that this is going to be 30% of the overall mark. We've already told, and there's obviously a bit of stuff that students want to do. What I want to bring your attention to, folks, is the following thing. Notice that our paper is marked out of 78 marks there, and it takes the students 75 minutes. Well, they've got a maximum of 75 minutes, let's put it in that way. Now, what that means for our students is when your students write their exam, they need to be working at 1.04 marks per minute. So when you are working with your students and you're doing things like, I don't know, timed assessments or whatever it might be with your students, you need to be focusing on that. You basically need to be challenging your students. Can you pick up a mark per minute or just over? That is what they're going to do in the real thing. Okay, so just a reminder, this is what they're going to see. And we'll get back to the sort of the question structures and things in future tutorials. Now, look at this word here. It is the word of criticalness. Now, I don't have a better one of saying this, but when we talk about paper 1, what we need to realise is that AO1, remember that was that K and U, knowledge and K and U, knowledge and understanding. That makes up 43% of the marks from paper 1. So which is the most important assessment objective, at least in terms of real marks? It's AO1. It's knowing things, it's understanding things. Then, as we move upwards, here on AO2, we are saying here that this is, so remember this is your application stuff. I'll just put apply here. This is 33% of the marks of paper 1 are for applying one's knowledge, explaining how one thing links to another, explaining how the concept that's been learned applies to movement, for example. And then finally, folks, we've got the idea that, I'm trying to find the right colour here, the idea that AO3, which is our analysis and analyse and evaluate, this is called A and E, analyse and evaluate. This makes up here 24% of the marks. Now, when you look at this on its first sort of construct, you could think to yourself, this is the important bit. My kids have got to know their stuff. And you're absolutely right, that is true. But this is a point I want to make. Students are good at this. So, when we look at this from a perspective of opportunity, in other words, how can you make your students better, air quotes, than the students in the centre down the road? Most students are going to get good at this, okay? But where many students fall down is here and here. So where is the opportunity? The opportunity is through brilliant knowledge and understanding to develop our students to be brilliant appliers and analysers and evaluators. Now, with that in mind, folks, I want to stress to you that your lessons and the time spent in your lessons needs to focus on what? Knowledge and understanding and building it. Applying that knowledge to performance or physical activity scenarios, and then being able to analyse and evaluate those concepts. And remember, although this is a small proportion, this is an even small proportion, the biggest opportunities come from those spaces because it's where other students miss marks. Now, in terms of content areas, there are 4 sections in terms of content from paper 1. We've got all those classic PE things, applied anatomy and physiology. We've got things like the musculoskeletal system, the cardiovascular, the respiratory systems. We've got things like energy, effects of exercise. All of those things in here, all those classics. But notice as well, we've got things like movement patterns, levers, axes, planes, how to describe movement. We've got physical training, including fitness, components of fitness, principles of training. We've got things such as fitness tests and training methodologies, for example. We've also got warm-ups and cool-downs. And throughout all of that, data can be incorporated. So using data can be incorporated here, or here, or here. We do not anticipate that your students will get a question in its own right just on mathematical skills. No, it will be something related to one of these other 3 areas that incorporates the mathematical skill along with it. So that's critical. And folks, to finish this off, it's one of the images that I think is most profound when we think about teaching paper 1 with our students, and it is the nature of questions. Think about it. Consider how many hundreds of hours you basically, teachers, you're going to spend some hundreds of hours You're going to spend some hundreds of hours with your students, right? You're going to be teaching them, all that sort of stuff. Notice ultimately what the end goal is. Your students, on every Paper 1 paper, they're going to get between 4 and 7 marks of multiple choice. Therefore, quizzing and building in that skill is essential. Your students are going to do massive amounts of short answer questions, things that are between 2 and 4 and 5 marks, 2 to 5 marks. Let me be clear, 2 to 5 mark questions, could even be 1 markers. But your short answer questions, they are your marks. That is where the meat and the gravy of this paper is. It's hard to say that every lesson students should be doing short answer questions with you, but it should be pretty damn close to that. And finally, folks, even though it looks like a relatively small red chunk, remind yourself that your students are going to do 15 marks worth of 6 mark and 9 mark question. In fact, on Paper 1, they're going to get 1 times 6 mark question, and they're going to get 1 times 9 mark question. And it's important to remember that this is not all AO3. Actually, a 6 marker and a 9 marker have AO1, AO2 and AO3, and you can see that in the descriptions here. But what do we need to make sure? We need to make sure that lesson by lesson by lesson by lesson by lesson, for hundreds of hours, our students are working up to practice what? Multiple choice, short answer, and extended responses. And that, guys, is why, for example, we publish centralized exam templates, or what we call centralized assessment models, to ensure that this is the student's experience. And of course, I urge you to ponder your course design and your lesson structures and think, am I developing this with my students as I should be? Thanks for listening.